Everyone, thanks for joining us for the City of LA Rec and Parks Needs Assessment. Um, Thanks for bearing with us a couple extra minutes as we were getting started. We're going to give it maybe another minute or two as some folks are still trickling in. But again, thanks for joining us.
Gracias a todos por su participación y bienvenidos a esta evaluación de las necesidades de los parques. Vamos a esperar 1 o 2 minutitos más para que todos se conecten.
All right, so I'm not seeing too many more people join, so I think we maybe are at a critical mass. If we can go ahead and begin. I want to go to the next slide. All right, welcome everyone. Again, thanks for joining us for the City of LA's Rec and Parks Needs Assessment. Before we dive into all the details, did want to go over some housekeeping items. So if you do need Spanish interpretation, there should be an interpretation icon on the Zoom at the very bottom. We do have Spanish interpretation, so you're able to pick that language to listen to, and I'll have Jackie go over that right now too.
Muy buenas tardes y nuevamente bienvenidos a la evaluación de las necesidades de los parques de la ciudad de Los Ángeles. El día de hoy habrá interpretación al español de manera simultánea. En el panel de Zoom, en la parte inferior derecha, van a ver un icono con un globo terráqueo. Por favor, pulsen en el globo terráqueo y escojan su idioma de preferencia, en este caso español. Gracias.
Thanks, Jackie. And if you give it maybe a second, it should show up now to get into there. We'll also have closed captioning at the bottom too, if you need that. And then from there, I am going to hand it over to Jessica, who's going to go through the presentation.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. We're thankful that you're taking a little bit of your Tuesday night to join us. My name is Jessica Henson. I'm a consultant for the City of Los Angeles, a landscape architect and planner, and I'm going to be joined by some of my colleagues tonight who are helping me present. I'll be joined by Andrew Dubczynski from Olin and Nora Healy from KDI, who are going to do different sections of this presentation. I just want to say thank you for following this process. Welcome you. The City of Los Angeles started the Parks Needs Assessment in 2025. This is a direction of the Department of Recreation and Parks, along with Council. And we've been working on it this year. The last time the city updated the Parks Needs Assessment was 2009. So we're definitely due for an update. And really, your voice is essential in this process and foundational to this effort so that we can understand the community's needs as we update the community needs assessment. Having traveled all around the city and done, more than 70 engagement types of events this year, I can tell you that our parks are incredibly popular. Millions of people are using our park system around Los Angeles, and parks really are critical to the well-being of residents and visitors alike. It's been really fun to do that, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of those results as we've gotten to the draft assessment tonight. Going to give a short project introduction. We'll talk a little bit about engagement. We'll do a draft of the walkthrough of what's out there in the draft Parks Needs Assessment. We'll tell you more about that. Andrew will talk through the guidelines and classifications. We'll give a window into the budget and cost estimates, prioritization, and what's coming up next. So some updates of where we've been. We've been in this 4-step process during the course of the year, the grounding, evaluation, and draft P&A. We've made it to the draft, so we are on schedule. The draft was posted last Tuesday on September 2nd, and you will have time to be able to review that draft. We are headed toward a final P&A at the end of the year. Right now, we are in the comment period for the draft P&A, so we have a 45-day comment period. And while technically this isn't like an EIR type document, we felt that having a time for people to comment was really important because the engagement of people and understanding the community's needs is foundational to this effort. So through October 15th, you can comment on the plan on the website. There are several different ways to do that. You can actually interact with all of the plan's content directly on the website in 10 different languages. You can also check out alt text for if you have trouble or are hard of seeing. There is also a PDF that you can either download or you can review online and see actually comment in real space. There are also, and you'll see at the end of this presentation, ways to send letters or make phone calls if you have additional comments that can't be submitted online. We hope you'll take some time to review that document. You can also check it out on your mobile phone. If you want, you can interact with the website on there. One of the really neat things that we've heard from a lot of people is the desire to check out their own park. So if you go to the website, you can actually see specifically navigate to the home banner, find a park, and either use the map or the different districts to find your specific park. And then you can read about your specific park. So if you're really looking to understand one specific park, definitely suggest this shortcut to the Find a Park component of the Parks Needs Assessment. The City of Los Angeles owns or operates over 500 park sites on 16,000 acres. We have almost 100 miles of trails. It's an incredibly vast system. And if we take all of those parks and we actually arrange them into a grid from their largest, which is Griffith Park in the upper left-hand corner, to the smallest, I love this graphic that we've been using this year because you can see that so many of our parks are community neighborhood parks that are really woven into the fabric of our everyday lives and very important to us. So from the largest iconic parks to the smallest parks, all of these play an important role in our city. Our system itself is incredibly varied. So from recreation centers, ball fields, skate parks, and tennis courts and golf courses and dog parks. We also have things like equestrian centers. We have we have camps that are in the mountains for children. And you may or may not know that the Griffith Observatory and the Greek Theater are actually part of our public park system. Right now, this year, we've been working on the Parks Needs Assessment, and the overall purpose of that process is to update the current and future needs and opportunities for the park system. And we really need this to be reflective of the diversity of cultures and communities around the city. Having had the opportunity to travel around the city and meet different people this year, I can tell you that there are unique needs in each community. We're also looking very long term. So in this case, we're looking 25 years and beyond. This really helps us set year-to-year budgets and project into the future what the need is for operations, maintenance, and potentially new parks or new parkland. We've been doing that using two processes. One is a very high-level mapping and different innovative tools, and the other really comes down to the lived geographies and realities of residents in different neighborhoods. At the high level, we're exploring things like climate factors, park pressure, distance to parks, parks needs, and really comparing them across the entire city. But this really comes down to what it's like for the lived realities of Angelenos on the ground. We recognize that many of us, like myself, who lives in LA, we use the parks as part of our day-to-day life. And what is that experience like? And what are the needs that are part of that? All of this work has come together through a lot of feedback from all of you. And Nora's going to give a brief retrospective on some of the engagement that we've been able to do this year. Nora?
Hi, folks. So public engagement has been foundational to our Parks Needs Assessment, and I'm going to get into a little bit about what that has looked like. So we had a three-pronged approach. we have a technical advisory committee made up of different agencies and local park advocates and other people who have really, nope, that's the steering committee. Our technical committee is other agencies around the city that have helped guide what our understanding of like what is possible in different partnerships. Our steering committee has been guiding this whole process. That has been made up of a couple of different agencies. One of the deputy mayors has been there. We also have park advocates, and they're really there to help guide this whole process. And then one of the most important parts has been all of you and the community outreach. That has looked like a number of different things, from pop-ups to traditional in-person meetings, to kids activities, to these types of virtual engagements and social media. Across the board, we have had 2 different surveys. We have had a number of different community meetings, youth workshops, tribal briefings. We've reached folks online and in person. We've talked to 10 different council districts and really spoke to people of different interest groups as well. Some of these engagements and pop-ups have been really fun. We went to the Ciclavia in Koreatown. We did a Healthy Days for Kids events, really meeting people where they were in order to get to reach the broadest possible audience and speak to the most Angelenos. One of the most important aspects is this project website, where we are able to communicate this incredibly dense book of materials in a little bit more of an accessible way. Jessica spoke about this a little bit earlier. You can find your own park on there, but we're also working on getting all of the different aspects of this plan on the website so that you can interact with it. And you're also able to translate the website into, I believe, it's available in 11 languages, and you can submit a comment directly on the website. More on that later. The last layer of this engagement is equity group sessions. So this is ensuring that folks who are often marginalized and left out of traditional city planning processes like this are still able to get their voices heard. So we spoke to advocates in a couple of different fields, and we kind of separated these into 4 groups. Critical social services. So this is how do people receive services in our parks and resources in our parks. Parks in Place, which is about ensuring that parks help keep this like vibrant economic local economy. The Public Stage, about arts in parks and about how to facilitate more local arts, and Access for All, ensuring that no matter your ability, gender, age, or race, you can enjoy LA parks.
In this next section, I'm going to tell you what you can expect. So again, as Nora said, thank you all so much for engaging this year. We hope you'll continue to engage as the fall goes on. But the draft is available. This brings together the knowledge that we've been able to pull from the community feedback and from a lot of the data resources, as well as the current facilities condition at each individual park in the park system. So the P&A draft has 5 different sections: context, Reckon Parks Today, community needs, guidelines, and implementation. And I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. But I also just want to point out, if you want a shortcut, you can also check out specific parks, as I mentioned earlier, and you can see how different factors of the P&A affect your local community neighborhood parks that you might use. So the first section of the P&A is the context section. This includes an executive summary, the planning context, which is some of the different local, county, state, federal planning documents that are related to our parks needs assessment, and a section that brings together engagement results, including the survey and some of the other data that we've been able to collect from communities this year. The next section is called, I think, next slide, maybe, taking a second. There we go. The next section is called Reckon Parks Today. And it has a piece on the history of our park system. We have a tremendously amazing park history. And if you really like history, I would encourage you to check this section out. and how our parks have changed over time. We have a section called Rec and Parks by the Numbers. This tells us what amenities we have today. And then a section that's a deep dive into the current budget and finance. Some of you know that at the beginning of this year, the Rec and Parks commissioners noted that they wanted to be transparent about where we have been for the last 15 to 25 years and how some of the reductions in the budget that Rec and Parks has really affected operations and maintenance. You may know that in the last 15 years, the City of Los Angeles budget has increased by 68%, but the actual dollars that Rec and Parks has to use for the system after the general fund reimbursements has only grown by 35%, which is actually less than the rate of inflation we've seen over the last same period of time. The next section, which is on community needs, brings together comparisons of benchmarking across the United States to other park systems. Our park system, unfortunately, out of the top 100 largest cities in the country, is ranked number 90 and has fallen in previous years. We have a lack of access to open space and really a lack of the ability to invest in some of these systems. Chapter 8 is where we get to a lot of the work that we've done based on the feedback, which is prioritizing sites around the city based on things like walkability, based on the facilities conditions. Andrew's going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. And then there's a section about regional snapshots if you want to zoom in on a particular zone of the city. The next section, this guideline section, really came from the community passion for how we would go about doing some of these improvements. So this section wasn't necessarily in our initial list of things that we were working on January 1st of this year, but we heard from a lot of community members that we understand that we need to make these improvements, but what are our values as we go about that, and how are we going to make those decisions? So this guideline section was really born out of those requests from the community. It includes pieces about how to go about site planning, the park classifications and updating those across the system, pieces on how to go about ongoing engagement, and what we call level of service standards. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's really related to how many amenities we have and how does it relate to, say, the popularity of a particular sport or what other communities might have. And then the last section, implementation, includes pieces about cost and funding, which I'll talk a little more in detail later in the presentation about, as well as an action plan. And that action plan actually includes things like decision-making frameworks. So we've worked really hard with Rec and Parks to take the community feedback and help put into decision-making frameworks how decisions are made at RAP. We've heard a lot this year that's not always transparent why a certain decision is being made. So these tools really help to clarify that and help to clarify what priorities the community wants and how those are being implemented. And like I said, for each park, you can actually learn how your park was prioritized in the overall system. You can also check out some other things such as which guidelines apply and how your park is classified, so what scale of park it is. And you can also check out what community needs and challenges affect that particular area of the city that might be unique to that region. This is actually a good moment for me to say that the slides are available online. We can make sure we have a link in the chat to that. I know there's a lot of content available here. You can also check out these slides not only in English and Spanish, but you can check them out in Mandarin, Korean, or Armenian on the website, as well as if you weren't able to attend one of the in-person meetings last week, you can check out the board that were shown if you really want to dive into some of those materials as well. I'm now going to pass it to my colleague, Andrew, who's going to step us through some of the guidelines and classifications.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. So like Jessica said, I'm going to talk a little bit about guidelines and classifications. There's a lot more to explore in the P&A itself. When we talk about level of service, we're talking about how many of different types of amenities should the city of LA have compared to how many it has right now. When we talk about classifications, we're really talking about how do we describe the types of parks that we have and the types of parks that we want. And the purpose of including the level of service and the classifications in the P&A is to help set mutual expectations between the city and residents so that everybody knows what to expect. So before the PNA process started, the city of LA had 3 different types of classifications: neighborhood parks, community parks, and regional parks. And there was a typical size associated with those. As you can see, there are some gaps in the different sizes, between 5 acres and 15, and between 20 and 50 acres. So before the PNA, with those classifications, those 3 classifications, all 3 of these parks in the top row were classified as neighborhood parks. So the 1/10 of an acre 105th Street Pocket Park was a neighborhood park, and so was the 22-acre Bee Canyon Park. And all of the parks on the bottom were classified as regional parks. So the 1-acre Little Landers Park, and also the 161-acre Venice Beach. Beneath the names here, you can see the different classifications that we've developed as part of the PNA to try to differentiate these different types of parks. So a mini park, a community school park, a canyon park, a historic landmark site, a community nature park, or a beach. I'm going to walk through the whole set of classifications that were developed as part of the PNA. So there are still neighborhood parks, community parks, and regional parks in the new classification system, but we're getting more specific to include mini parks, small neighborhood parks, and neighborhood parks, large neighborhood parks, and neighborhood nature parks. In terms of community parks, we have community parks, large community parks, and community nature parks. And regional parks, and regional nature parks. You'll notice the addition of the nature parks in here being a very specific or a deliberate intention to create parks that are more nature focused. In addition to the neighborhood, community, and regional parks, we have historic landmark sites, more linear parks like greenways, linear parks, and canyon parks, school-related sites like community school parks and school pools, and then other facilities like beaches and mountain camps, single-purpose sites, and golf courses. They're all part of the Rec and Park system. The classifications and the other guidelines that are in the PNA are all tied to a capital life cycle. All parks go through a cycle of acquiring land, doing a vision plan for the site, designing the site, constructing it, operating, and evaluating. And periodically, RAP evaluates whether parks are operating the way that they should be. And the guidelines point to how Rec and Parks could evaluate the different parks at different stages of this process. We talked about the PNA including level of service standards, and that really speaks to the number of facilities that the city has. And going back to Jessica mentioned benchmarking, we took a look at how LA compares to different peer cities. We looked at the number of amenities per population that the peer cities provide. We also took a look at what people said in the community survey in terms of their priority for which amenities they use the most and want to see. And we also took a look at which sports and activities are growing the fastest so that the city could stay ahead of those trends. And all of those together helped set a target, a level of service standard for the future that said how many of different amenities the city should have moving forward.
This next section, yeah, hey, thanks, Andrew. This next section is on the budget data and cost estimates, and I actually already saw one question in the Q&A about this, so hopefully we'll be able to respond to that and answer that question here. So as a part of this year, we've been going through a multi-step process to update and consider the budgets, and so it's been really a 6-stage process. Some of you might have come along in some of the earlier steps where we were looking at the existing budget. We were analyzing the existing gaps and looking at how those benchmarks compared to other cities. I will tell you that LA spends about half as much per capita than some of our peer cities. So that was an interesting finding earlier this year. You can check that out in the PNA draft. What we've been doing most recently is steps 4 and 5 here, which are using cost estimates to consider what we need in the future and identifying revenue sources. So that cost estimate piece includes these different little tokens here in red. We've heard from a lot of people in the community I'm less focused on new things and really focused on operations and maintenance and how do we maintain the things that we have. So where a lot of studies that look at parks needs are super focused on only new capital, we've been doing both. So on the left here are, renovations, new facilities, or new parkland, but we have also been looking deeply at operating costs. Both of these components are critical. We've looked at all of the facilities and the facilities condition assessment for all the different parks that are part of this classification system wide. We've taken about 40 to 50 different elements across the parks and classified them into fair condition, poor condition, or really good condition, fair condition, poor condition, and then assigned them to whether they need a minor refresh, a major refresh, or an entirely new build. We've done this for park facilities, architectural elements, infrastructure elements, including things like considering which parks with older, say, electrical service might need an electrical system overhaul. I think to my knowledge, this is the first time sort of that systemic thing in LA has been looked at for all of our parks at this scale. And we're also looking at new park facilities and the acquisition of land. So all of these different components have come together on the deferred maintenance and the capital side. On the operations side, one of the big things we've been looking at is staffing. A lot of community members have told us this year that there are not enough operations and maintenance staff or not good enough maintenance at facilities. Rec and Parks staff peaked about 18 years ago in terms of its largest number and has been dwindling since. We actually have more acreage of park than we did then. So less Rec and Parks staff are doing more work today than 15 or 20 years ago. We've looked at what it would take to increase the operations and maintenance budget. We've looked at things like increasing the capacity and the level of service of our staff, say by a 1.5 times. We've also looked at getting back to our peak, which was a lot more full-time, but way more part-time employees. And we've also looked at increasing the staff per acre to align with our peers. Our peer cities have about twice as many staff per acre as we have. Balancing that out, we're also looking at things like expenses. And so what does it cost to buy lawnmowers, or what are some of the other expenses that we have in the city? So that's being calculated in here as well. When these numbers get calculated out and I'll break these down a little bit more in the following slides, but we have a one-time capital need over the next 25 years of $15 billion. That's in 2025 dollars. And annual operating needs of about 525 to 625 million. I do want to say really quickly that our current budget is around 350 million. So this is not 625 would be an additional, say, 200 to 250 million beyond where we are today. Of the 15 billion, breaking that down a little bit more, that number breaks down into about $2.6 billion of deferred maintenance. Those are projects that get put off because there isn't funding in the system or capacity to take them on. A report that was done in around 2018 reported that number at 2 billion. As we just get further down the road and defer maintenance, that gets more expensive. We're now at 2.6 estimated here. The level of service goals, which is around 12.1, this represents if we took all of the things that we've heard from Angelenos this year that they would like to see over the next 25 years, that includes new facilities, new parkland, as well as replacing things that might need replacement, like new pavement at a basketball court. That's about $12 billion over the next 25 years. On the operating side, as I mentioned, we really need an operating budget that's a couple $100 million more than what we have today. That would be meeting our current staffing gap, as well as increasing those expenses as needed. But really importantly, many of you may know that the Rec and Parks Department does something called the General Fund Reimbursement. This is money that Rec and Parks pays back to the city's general fund to cover staff benefits and pensions, as well as utility bills that get paid to LADWP. Currently, that number is around $100 million annually. We do expect that over the next 25 years, that number is going to continue to grow. And the more that we plan for it ahead, the better, so that we're really thinking holistically about this budget. I do want to take a moment also to say that there already is some money in the system. We already have what like the city mandate percentage charter fund allocation that goes to Rec and Parks annually. Right now, that's about $278 million. There is earned revenue, somewhere between $50 and $60 million annually that Rec and Parks pulls in. And then in the past, there have been general fund contributions from Rec and Parks. In 2025, that was around $13 million. There also are things like developer fees and Quimby fees that get paid when developers build units in the housing buildings over 50 units in the city. So I want to say that all of the money that I was just discussing is not brand new money to be identified. Some of that already exists. And so the purpose of the P&A is to help steward that money well and help that decision-making of how funding is going to be stewarded legible and clear. In addition to stewarding the existing resources well and continuing to do so, the P&A also identifies potential streams for new funding sources. And there are ways that we can start to think about these strategies that might be led by Rec and Parks, or strategies where Rec and Parks may partner, whether it be with council or with others, to come up with ideas. So we've been talking about ideas to increase earned revenue generation, ideas where we could further leverage things like Measure A, which is the county parks measure, or Measure W, which is the county safe clean water, Prop 4, for example, which is the state climate bond, or Prop O, another state bond, or potentially continuing to expand partnerships with nonprofits, looking at conservancies. And also have looked at strategies that would require partnerships, say with council, the mayor's office, or voters. One would be increasing the percentage of the city budget that is allocated to Rec and Parks. That would be increasing the charter percentage. Evaluating a property tax assessment. So some of you that have lived in the city for a long time may be familiar with Prop K. Prop K was passed in 1996 by voters and will sunset next year. So that measure, which was a $750 million measure over 30 years, will expire. And so what would the future look like if there was something to replace that? And then other ideas that different communities and different stakeholders have brought up this year would be a sales tax or city bond options to help support our parks. But there has been a lot of encouragement that people really feel that parks play such a significant role in our lives that they are worth investing in. I'm going to pass it back to Andrew to finish out the prioritization updates.
Thanks, Jessica. If you have joined on any of our previous meetings, we have talked about the way that we are prioritizing sites. And just as a refresher, or for anybody who's joining us for the first time, we've developed what we called the universe of sites that we have then prioritized, and that the prioritization has helped us identify which parts of the P&A are most applicable. So the universe of sites includes all existing park sites, plus potential park sites for the future in areas of the city that are not well served by parks right now. In terms of the prioritization strategy, we used criteria that included everything from park pressure, tree canopy, climate vulnerability, to habitat connectivity, tree species composition, and alignment with other city and county priorities. The categories of these different criteria that we used, initially we thought that things might fit really neatly into a single bucket of either a Rec and Park priority, an equity priority, a resiliency priority, or a city-county priority. But we realized that a lot of these are cross-cutting and touch on many of those different priorities. Some of these criteria were given more weight than others based upon feedback from the steering committee that has been providing guidance to us throughout this process. if we take a look at how all of the different sites were prioritized based on all of these criteria, we could see in the darkest colors are the highest priority and the lightest colors are the lowest priority. The composite prioritization shows that the highest priority sites are clustered in East, Central, and South LA, and parts of Southern and East parts of the Southern and Eastern San Fernando Valley. Just breaking that down to more clearly see where the first priority sites are, the second, third, fourth, and fifth priority sites. You can see those are highlighted in the darker colors on each of these. When we take a look at how all of the sites got prioritized based on these criteria, 25 sites ended up in that first priority tier, followed by 148 sites in the second, 171 in the third, 133 in the fourth, and 42 in the fifth. So about a third of all of the sites were in the first or the second priority tier. Just taking a quick look at which sites ended up in the top priority, that first highest priority tier. And these are in alphabetical order, just for ease of being able to find them. All of the ones that have pictures are existing sites, and all of the ones that have these little thumbnail maps with the pink squares are parts of the city where we think that there's opportunity potentially for new parks. And so there's a combination of parks that are existing and places that we think the city could use additional parks that ended up in this highest priority tier. The other thing to note about this is that the actions that the city might take for each of these high priority sites may not be the same. In some cases, it may just be maintaining what's there and providing enough staff to adequately have enough service at each of these parks. And in some cases where the conditions of certain amenities may not be up to par, that may mean replacing amenities or refreshing parks.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm just going to take a minute to wrap up and then we'll take some questions. There's some upcoming next steps and dates that you can check out. First, if you've really just enjoyed tonight so much and you would really love a deep dive into more of these topics, we have a few deep dive webinars coming up in the next few days. You'll also be able to watch them on videos if that's your preference. Tomorrow night, we're doing a deep dive into the budget, cost estimates, and decision-making framework. On Thursday night, we are doing a deep dive into guidelines, classifications, and level of service. And next Thursday night on September 18th, we're going to do a deep dive into the site prioritization. We'll certainly take questions tonight, but if those topics seem particularly interesting to you and you'd like to hear those, please feel free to join us and you can register for them. Or if you have a friend that you know would be interested, please invite them. We have other things that are coming up. Actually, right now, there's also a listening session with some of our tribal groups going on tonight. We have pop-ups coming up at Ciclavia, at the Senior Center Fiesta Party at North Hollywood, the Congress of Neighborhood Councils Exhibitor Fair, and then we also will be at Felicia Mahood Multipurpose Center later this month, the beginning of October. We have equity sessions that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. We have a lot of groups, over 30 groups that have participated in those this year. Really exciting, just to make sure that different groups are having their voice heard. I just wanted to remind everyone that we have a 45-day comment period here, and our steering committee will also be reviewing things in parallel. We've got folks like the Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy tracking along parallel to the community process, which has really been great. You can comment on the draft P&A on the website. Each chapter, like I said, is live on the website and links to other chapters. But you can also download a PDF if you prefer, or if you want to print a copy out, it's possible. We hope that you will go on and say that the comments, that you can give feedback on any page on the website just by clicking the feedback bar on the right side. Tonight, we're going to take questions via Zoom, the Q&A, and Isaiah is going to help us sort through those so that we can get to as many as we possibly can in the next 35 to 40 minutes. And you can also email questions, and there are instructions that Isaiah will walk us through here, how folks can use them. I think one thing that I'll just take a minute to say is, better parks really make better communities for all of us. So reducing pressure in some of our most underserved communities also takes pressure off of some of our, stellar parks that get a ton of use in other neighborhoods. So we really see the parks needs assessment as a situation where rising tides can raise all boats and improve all of our parks citywide if we all work together. Isaiah, do you want to give some instructions on asking questions?
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. So if you do have a question, there is a Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you click that, you can add a question. You can also add comments in there. We are going to respond to the questions as we receive them. So we're going to try to go in order. If we do get questions that are like the exact same or very similar, we are going to try to group those. That way we can try to respond to the whole question or sort of multiple questions in one. If you do have difficulties with the Zoom Q&A, or if you're calling in via telephone, you can go ahead and use this text line as well. It is 213-290-0277. Again, that is 213-290-0277. Again, if you are not able to use the Zoom Q&A function, you can text that number. And if you're also having any difficulties, you can also text or call that number too. So with that, we are going to dive into the questions now. Okay, first question that we have up is there a list of participants?
Great question. We generally don't post the personal names of individuals. I can tell you we have 51 folks online. We do post the lists of attendees at the interest groups, the steering committees, and the technical advisory committee, and you can check those out online if you want to know who else is tracking. But we did not request the name to share the personal names of all private attendees here today.
Great, thanks, Jessica.
And maybe Max, you could put in the link if people do want to see who has been attending as some of the stakeholder leads for different interest groups around the city. Maybe you could post like the technical advisory committee list and the steering committee list in the chat.
Great. Okay, so going on to the next question, what is the cost of the P&A study?
Great. So the actual study this year has around a $4 million cost. That was approved in the Rec and Parks Board of Commissioners on December, I think it was 19th, 2024. If anybody wants to read the board report that includes the scope of work and the outline, that covers the 13 different consultants working on it, as well as the 12 community partner organizations that are receiving grants to support their outreach across the year.
Great. Next question. It was asked in a prior meeting about a presentation by Abundant Housing at a charter reform meeting on July 30th this year that Abundant Housing is putting forth to allow properties owned by Rec and Parks to be used for affordable housing development without the need for a land swap as required by Section 594 D3AL. What have you found out about this? What is the update? Has anyone from Rec and Parks or your group gone to see these meetings and spoken to them?
Great. And I want to thank this person if they're the same person that brought this up on the interest group for drawing our attention to that. We did straight away find that presentation and talk to the city charter reform group. We are going to present to the study group on October 18th. And we did review that study. I think it's very important that housing and parks not be put in opposition, but how do we think about ways that we're not suggesting in the P&A that parklands be transitioned to permanent housing by any stretch of the imagination. So how do we think about strategies for housing citywide that don't put parks in jeopardy and think about strategies for parks citywide that don't put housing in jeopardy. I really do want to thank this person for drawing our attention to that so that we could be sure to get on the city charter study group agenda.
Great. The next one isn't a question, but just acknowledging this comment. The comment is, there's no security or cleanliness in the parks.
Yeah, great point. A lot of folks this year have definitely shared a similar concern, and that's why the operations and maintenance is just foundational here.
Okay, next question. I realize that Koreatown is not currently included in the plan. Compared to other areas, Koreatown is definitely lacking in parks and recreational spaces. Do you have any plans to address this for that neighborhood?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, Koreatown is one of the top tier locations identified in the plan as one of the top 25 locations citywide that needs a new park. So we can put a link in the chat. Koreatown, Westlake Koreatown is actually identified as one of the key spots. And in the regional snapshot, Koreatown shows up as one of the areas citywide that is most lacking in park space. Nora, do you want to chime in with any additional information on that?
I do not have additional information. I do have the links popped right up for people to see that can be put into the chat for both the regional snapshot and the Koreatown Westlake.
Great. Max, could I ask you to copy from column G where Nora has that in the notes here and get it into the chat? Thank you so much. Great.
Great. Looks like those have been added now.
Awesome.
Okay, next question. In regard to maintenance, parks are not being maintained now. We are worried that if parks are not maintained now, how are more parks going to be kept up? When speaking with a rec and park supervisor today at a park, we asked about items that need to be repaired, and that person stated there's no funding and no people to maintain what we have now, no one to fix sprinklers and leaking faucets. What's going to change if they won't repair items now?
Yes, this is exactly the issue that we have citywide in a lot of parks, and this is why that increase in the operational budget to get back to prior staffing levels is foundational. We've heard from a lot of communities, we don't want anything new until we're maintaining the things we have now. So Rec and Park staff peaked at about 1.5 times the number of people that we have in terms of full-time staff, but over 237% of what we have in terms of part-time staff right now. Also, cuts in parks have meant that community centers are no longer rec centers. Most of them aren't open on Sundays. I think it's up to ultimately, voters to decide how to prioritize, but what we've learned in the parks needs assessment is that really addressing that shortfall of the annual budget is critical. And how we think about that through the percentage of the city budget, or how we think about that through, not necessarily saying it's taxing people more, but what percentage of the city budget should be going to our parks and to operations and maintenance is really a question, as well as should there be a replacement for Prop K, or should any sales tax or something like that go to parks? I think it's a significant issue. I want to say that this person uplift and say what they're saying matches a lot of the experience of their neighbors across the city, and it's very important.
Great. Okay, next question. Approximately $8,500 per new dwelling unit is allocated for park and recreation fees. Over the past 10 years, Koreatown has seen a significant number of new units developed. Where has that park and recreation funding been spent? And then a question, not K-Town.
Yeah, so first, let me, just in case anyone on the call is less familiar with developer fees, I'll just talk a little bit about that. I'm going to send a link here, Max, to you to share in the chat about anybody that really wants to dive into the annual reports of where developer fees have been spent. So when a developer wants to develop a building that has more than 50 units, they have an early consultation process with Rec and Parks, who makes a recommendation as to whether or not that developer should do a land dedication for park land or pay a one-time fee as a developer fee. The final decision of what that fee should be, how much it should be, or if it should be a land dedication, is a decision made by the Planning Commission. They ultimately make that choice. Once they make that decision, the funding, once it's paid by the developer, goes to RAP, and the RAP Board of Commissioners is the only group that can allocate funding specifically to a different project. Based on the type of project, the type of park. So the park classification dictates the radius from which money can be spent. So for example, a regional park like Griffith Park, developer fees from a larger radius can be spent there. For smaller parks, the radius is tighter. There is every year an annual report that shows exactly where a development's funding has been spent. Max has put that into the chart. I don't off the top of my head know, and if somebody else on the team can speak more specifically to some of the efforts that have been done most recently in Koreatown and the surrounding areas, super welcome you to speak up or to put that in the chat. But definitely this annual report is where those pieces of information are live.
Next question. After 6 emails / 1 year, I've unsuccessfully gotten no Rec and Park specific R&R for Warner Ranch Park. Do they exist and how do I get them? The park prohibits sports. Small lettering indicates so, yet 3 to 4 teams have marked their field and play daily. How do you enforce no team sports? Same with no open flame. Folks continue to barbecue despite pine tree fire risk. How do you enforce a small, not obvious sign? Thank you.
Thanks. I have heard this question from the Warner Ranch Park folks that are seeking to understand the rules and regulations of the local park. I think this actually matches issues that we've heard around the city, which is enforcement is very challenged in our park system. A lot of this is, lack of ranger staff and others to enforce those. I do not have a copy of the Warner Ranch Park rules and regulations. And I know that this group has also emailed the RAP Board of Commissioners. As of tonight, I can say we will continue to note that comment. I think how things get enforced when Rec and Parks has a huge lack of staff is an issue that leads back to the budget problems and the fact that we will need to increase the annual operating budget of Rec and Parks by probably about $200 million annually to reach the level of maintenance and enforcement that people have requested in their parks this year.
Great. Okay, there was a question that was answered directly in the Q&A to this individual, but we'll ask it here, plus another question that's similar. Are these slides available online, and when will the recording of these meetings be posted?
Great. Slides are available online. You can download them in 5 different languages, and the recording posted online, trying to do it as fast as we can, because we'd like to make it available before we get too much deeper into the deep dive sessions. I don't know, Isaiah, a couple of days, what do you think?
Yeah, like 1 to 2 days after this.
It's great.
But we shared the link to the slides after that too. So it is in the chat where you can find the slides from this meeting and others. Okay, next one. How can I submit the community options?
I'm not sure exactly what that person means, but maybe I can answer a few different questions and see if they apply, but would encourage this person to ask another question if I don't. If you have recommendations, Andrew, would you be able to give us a little tour of how the website feedback function works so that people could see on the website via your screen share how they could give feedback online?
Yeah, give me just 1 second to pull that up.
No problem. Meanwhile, I'm also going to ask Max to put in the chat an email address if you would prefer to send an email for the record. You can do that. You can also send a letter, or I send a fax, I guess you could. But all those are options for sure. I'll turn it over to Andrew to step us through how to submit different feedback online.
Yeah, absolutely. So on every page of the PNA website, you'll see a little tab at the bottom right that says submit a comment on the PNA. And if you click on that, you have two options. One is you have have a comment regarding specific content on this page that you're looking at, or you have a comment regarding the PNA as a whole. So you can pick one of these two options. If you have a comment as a whole, you'll get a box that just asks you for your comment and your email address. If you have a comment on a something specific on this page, you could actually just click on the thing that you have a comment on and then leave us a comment, and then we'll know the thing that you clicked on to provide that comment. If you'd prefer to look at this in more of a PDF format and leave your comments that way, if you scroll down to get involved, there's a link here it says if you'd prefer to comment on a PDF instead, click here. And when you do that, you get this sidebar with the plus sign, allows you to click on something and leave a comment, just like I showed on the website, but this is on the PDF instead.
Andrew, could you show people where they could download the PDF too if they're like, all of this is much too fancy for me?
Absolutely. At the bottom of the website, on every single page, there's this purple image of the cover of the printed version of the park needs assessment. And if you click on this, you'll get a PDF of the PNA that you can download for yourself.
Great, thanks.
Great, so we'll jump to the next question. How does the PNA's goal of achieving social equity play out specifically? What are examples? Thank you for an excellent presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So when we have been talking about equity around the city, we've been looking at a few key factors, several things that affect equity. We've looked at past investment, what parks around the city have had recent investment over the past 10 to 20 to 25 years, which ones haven't. So that's been a factor we've looked at. We've looked at other things like environmental burden and social indicators like income level as well around the city to understand neighborhoods that have more, say, pollution burden, say from a freeway next to them, or have more density because they're getting more intensity of development. So those sort of things are big factors when we look at park development as well as the need for parks. And really thinking about how do we provide equal opportunity for everyone in the city to enjoy their park spaces and enjoy lovely park spaces. I'm going to have Nora speak in a second here to some of the specific elements we've been talking about with equity around the city. I will say that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of pressure gets put on parks in certain neighborhoods because people will literally get in their car and drive across town to use a better park. But improving parks in communities that maybe don't have great parks or don't have enough parks really takes the pressure off system-wide. So the prioritization system that we've come up with, based on the feedback from communities, really looks at what are the top 25 places around the city that have these issues, how to improve those parks because it will reduce pressure in the entire system. So that's been a really big way that we've looked at equity. Koreatown came up earlier as one of the top tier areas that need new parks. And Koreatown is experiencing a lot of densification right now. We're looking at issues like that to understand. East LA is another great example where there has been a lot of historic pollution. In some of the neighborhoods we've looked at, there have even been things that we call like redlining, if you're familiar with the term. This was a practice in the mid-20th century that looked at neighborhoods and how housing loans were done. we can still to this day see neighborhoods that are impacted by those past practices in a negative way. And it impacts people's ability to access generational wealth or to build generational wealth. And so we're looking at how all of these things affect communities and where we really need to be investing in those parks. Nora, do you want to expand how some of the equity sessions have been exploring this?
Yeah, I would love to. I would say the equity sessions are looking less at a geographic focus and looking at some issues that kind of cross-cut across the whole system. For example, accessibility in parks. And we started our equity sessions. There's 18 sessions in total. We started the first couple of them really as listening sessions, trying to hear from folks, from advocates and people with lived experiences about how the Parks Department is and is not working for them and different opportunities. We then took that, we took what they said, we thought about some more specific actions, we brought it to them again, and we spent quite a bit of time really developing specific actions and specific guidelines that could be baked into the entire document. You'll notice that there's not one section in the document just labeled equity, because we really wanted these equity to touch every aspect of this. So we workshopped a lot of guidelines with these groups. We brought it back, we wrote it into this first big public draft of the PNA. And now we're working on reviewing it with these folks. Is it living up to the things that they wanted? How is it feeling? And these are the same guidelines that you can review in the PNA. For example, one example might be, we heard that from disability advocates that they didn't feel like they were meaningfully brought into park planning initiatives, so that we have ADA and accessible features from the beginning, that these are like afterthoughts. So we created some guidelines around not only ongoing engagement, but how to make engagements more accessible for everyone, so that you can really hear from voices, and also to specifically reach out to the disabled voices in your community when planning new parks. And we have these guidelines that kind of talk a little bit more in depth about what this might mean, and also how you can go beyond just like standard ADA meeting requirements to make a space even more welcoming.
Great, thanks, Nora.
All right, so next question. Hello, Sally Ann with Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. I didn't see in the slides, but did the PNA include elements from California 30 by 30 or Rivers Mountains Conservancy Common Ground Open Space Plan? I do want to note Prop 68 funds are still available, at least with RMC.
Great. Hi, Sally Ann. It's great to have you on listening tonight. Thanks for that note. For those of you that might not be familiar, the California 30 by 30 is an effort to conserve 30% of California's land by 2030. This is a really wonderful, exciting process to think future about climate and other issues. I think one thing that's very exciting about the acquisition aspect of the plan, and something that I know some of the advocates for parks like Trust for Public Land and LA Neighborhood Initiative are very excited about, is the ability to expand our park system. So I would say that those certainly tie to things like the 30 by 30 and the Common Ground Open Space Plan. I think that's something that we could potentially even uplift more in the final version of the plan, just to make those references to other planning efforts that are potentially aligned. Great question and comment, and good to know about the Prop 68 funds. We'll make a note and see where those are landing for others as well.
Okay, I think the next one is mostly a comment, but we'll read it off here. Maybe there's a question in there. My neighborhood council dropped the ball and never submitted a plan for our parks. You guys never came to our area. One facility in particular, Cheviot Hills Rec Center, especially the pool complex, is in shameful shape. Its poor condition is actually accelerating the facility life cycle. That is, it's being run into the ground through neglect. The city will never again be able to build the complex, which dates the pre-Prop 13 era. And yet, beguilingly, your draft document ranks the facility among the 4th least likely to get help. How can I draw attention to the mistake here? When I look at the top priority parks, I see you all are planning to build stuff while letting our once lovely facility go to rack and ruin. Makes no sense. I question your ranking priorities. Quimby funds have been generated nearby in Century City, and yet it never seems to be directed to our park. I will not vote for proposition or bond to support parks. Clearly, funds do not come to my area.
Thanks for that note. Couple things. So would still invite your neighborhood council to send in a report. Certainly, we have this period of the comments till October 15th. So, don't delay. Understood that you guys weren't able to get that in earlier this year, but certainly welcome a comment report. I do want to speak to a couple things here because I think the prioritization overall does not suggest that facilities should not be operated and maintained. So I want to say to the person here is, we are saying baseline, the Rec and Parks budget annually needs to be increased by $200 million plus annually. And the P&A is saying that that is system-wide. That is not suggesting that only one neighborhood gets additional staffing or additional resources. That is a system-wide increase that we need to make to address issues like this person is calling attention to, where we have a staffing issue or a facility that is existing that is not being maintained. The P&A is not suggesting to keep putting off that deferred maintenance or those continuing operational problems, but rather that we need a system-wide increase in operations and maintenance dollars. Number two, the $15 million capital budget, which includes $2.6 billion of deferred maintenance, includes all 5 tiers of priority parks of the facilities conditions assessment. So if there is a pool at your rec center that is rated in poor condition, the budget money is in that $15 billion number that we've included. That $15 billion does not exclude any park in the city. The third thing that I would say is the amount of money that is available is certainly limited. So this person is totally correct in saying that right now, today, there's not enough money in the system to fix everything that we want to fix. So how we can get that money directed to places that need it is certainly critical and is a critical component. I welcome this person's comments. I don't know all the details of where the Century City Quimby funds have been spent recently. I'd have to look at the annual report that Max posted in the chat a bit earlier. But I just, in case anybody has misheard anything tonight, please know that that $15 billion number includes money for all facilities that have been identified around the city as needing love. So maybe we can even post the conditions assessment currently on the Find a Park. And I don't know, Andrew, if you can pull up the park that was mentioned here, or Max, if you have it available. But I'm just looking on the Find a Park here, and that pool is classified in poor condition today, which means that the dollars for improving it, rebuilding it, have been included in the Parks Needs Assessment. That's the Cheviot Hills. The link is now there if you want to browse. So just confirming what that person has said, the pool there is not in great shape, and that budget has been included in the Parks Needs Assessment.
Great. Okay, moving to the next question here. Howdy, in order to reduce human eye strain, light pollution, and harm done to pollinators, will street lights, lights in general, and parklands be changed to warmer toned LEDs in collaboration with LA Lights?
Great question. Love the fact that this person is thinking about the warmer toned LED is better for wildlife and also a warmer glow for humans. We have included in the design guidelines some components about lighting. I'd have to check to see how detailed right now we've gotten about color temperature, but potentially something we could also expand upon in the final. It's a great idea.
Great. Okay, next question. I am an employee of Griffith Observatory and a board member of the LA Astronomical Society, which is celebrating 100 years next year. I would like to know if any thoughts have been given to protecting the skies and parks through lamppost covers, for example, and allowing Angelinos to see the stars. This is very important for humans, biodiversity, and the environment.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear this. So reducing light pollution shields, these sort of things are really foundational to how we think about parks and sustainability in the future, both when we repair things as well as replace things. There is a section about sustainability in the guidelines. Again, I think that's an area with these types of comments that we can continue to strengthen, but really glad people are thinking not only about what we do, but how we go about doing it.
Right, and next question, is the city of LA exploring or open to exploring community-based partnerships to take care of unstaffed pocket and neighborhood parks?
Yeah, this is a question that's come up a couple times this year, and there are some volunteer groups that are really active at parks, and we've talked a lot about park ambassadors and the potential for that, and Nora can speak to that in a minute. I will say that there's sort of a two-edged sword to volunteers. Sometimes volunteer groups get really involved, and it's great and really dependable, and that becomes a great partnership. Other times people might start strong and then fall off. And it becomes a gap. And other times, a volunteer system might be started saying like, oh, we're gonna take care of an aspect that we're adding to a park. And as that falls off, it becomes an additional burden to rec and parks. So I think there's a lot of interest and hope of what the future here could be. And there are some successful examples of volunteer groups around the city collaborating with RAP. But holistically, for groups that want to get involved in that way, there is what does that look like? Nora, do you want to speak a little bit more towards this?
Sure. I can speak specifically to the ambassador program. Our equity sessions, this was something that came directly from them, kind of wanting more staff in the parks for maintenance and security, but also seeing as how that could kind of like build community as well. What we have proposed in the PNA is something that suggests park ambassadors could function in kind of potentially two different ways. Some cities have used it for youth professional development, and both of these are paid, by the way. These are not necessarily like volunteer positions, but youth professional development, connecting young folks to jobs in the parks, potentially finding a pathway forward in that type of work. And another one is the Promotoras model that is currently in use in some parks in East LA, as well as some schools in East LA. And this would coordinate with community-based organizations in severely disadvantaged communities to kind of operate and staff the program. And these ambassadors would be able to connect folks with resources and just be kind of like eyes on the ground in a lot more parks in a way that it would be different than a park ranger.
Great, thank you, Nora.
Right, the next one is mostly a comment, and it looks like there are two that came in, so we're going to group these together. I'm a volunteer with the Highland Park Rec Center. We are looking into more lighting at our park upgrades on our baseball fields, also more picnic tables, also shade for our baseball dugouts. We also need the outdoor basketball courts resurfaced. It's been over 25 years since it was done. We also desperately need and want a mural on our building so the tagging will stop. And our restrooms need a lot of attention inside the building and outside.
Thank you for those notes. We'll add those into our log here.
Okay, next question. Wondering how the planning/funding will work given the budget concerns with Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's a great question. And as many of you might know, that in 2026, the budget process in April, May, June, we had a deficit, and the mayor and the council were looking across the city for where to make those adjustments. One of the big things about the Parks Needs Assessment, the reason why this is really important to project over a number of years, is doing all of our park planning just based on whether or not the city budget has an annual surplus or an annual deficit is not great future proofing. And so what the P&A allows us to do is not just look at this year or next year where we are in this budget crisis, but 5 and 10 years out and to plan more proactively around that. It gives Rec and Parks tools to make those longer term budget requests or partnerships. So certainly we are in this deficit period right now. Many of you know that additional city positions were cut this year. But as we look to this longer term thinking, it can really help get out of that annual budget cycle being the sole decider of the health of our park system. So that's one big thing about the Parks Needs Assessment. This budget analysis has allowed Rec and Parks to already start to make the arguments for how the budget should shift over time. I mentioned earlier, the city budget is growing. It has grown in the last 15 years by 68%. Rec and Parks has only, the operating side has only grown by 35%. So it's not that our city budget isn't growing. It's the percentage of our city budget that we think it should go to our parks. And so as a resident of LA, and I really value what parks bring, and I think parks are increasingly on the front line of a lot of the services that we just rely on, whether it's fire or emergency relief or other things like during COVID. And so parks are very important, and thinking about, what percentage of the city budget should go toward them, how we think about that in more than just the annual cycle, and how we think about what partnerships at the city, county, state, federal level can help make a more sustainable model into the future, I think is really important.
Okay, the next one is a comment that's actually a little bit related to that. Almost 50% of the charter mandated assessment is kicked back to the general fund. Since 2010, over 1.2 billion has been kicked back to the city.
Yep. So this is exactly related to something I was saying earlier. Those numbers, staff pensions, benefits, and utility costs will probably continue to rise. And so right now, the city charter mandated assessment, this is the percentage that the city council must give to Rec and Parks. But like was noted in 2008, the city voted to start doing a reimbursement for staff pensions, benefits, and utilities. That number has grown to be a very large number, almost a third of the budget today. And that number will probably continue to rise. So should Rec and Parks actually get a bigger percentage of the city budget to reflect the fact that Rec is paying for more things today than they were 15 years ago? Or should there be other strategies to address that? Obviously, that will ultimately be up to the voters to decide, but the P&A makes these issues available to the community to understand.
Right. Next question. Where have Quimby fees gone that were garnered through construction in Century City? I had heard it was supposed to come to the Cheviot Hills Rec Center and its pool complex, but apparently that has not occurred. How can I find out?
Yeah, there's an annual report, and we'll put that into the chat for this person to see.
Okay, next question. Will any park/open space be accelerated or worse, delayed indefinitely due to the LA Olympics? Are there risks? Is there a risk that funds will be diverted for the Olympics?
So the Parks Needs Assessment, we're looking really 25 years into the future, while the Olympics are planned to be in 2028. They are not, it's being run by LA 2028, not the city of Los Angeles. And so the Parks Needs Assessment is a generational thing that's sort of beyond that scale. Whether or not individual projects will get tied to the timeline of the Olympics, I couldn't say, but the overall budgeting effort is completely separate from separate in the sense that this effort has taken into account the need of parks separate from the Olympics.
Yeah, the next question is, besides talking to our council member, who else can we talk to about our needs being addressed? We have been overlooked year after year. And just looking at some of the other comments, I think this is related to the Highland Park Rec Center.
Yeah, so you can always talk to your council members, a great point. You can email the RAP Board of Commissioners. We can drop that into the chat. You can also attend a RAP Board of Commissioners meeting and make public comment. They meet the first and third Thursday of each month at a different rec center around the city. You could look at their upcoming schedule on the board website, which we can drop in the chat. I'm sorry to hear that this group feels overlooked, but I will say there are a lot of park facilities in the city that have a similar concern, and a lot of it does come back to what we've been talking about tonight with staffing and budget.
Okay. Next one is mostly a comment. Right now, in the west end of the valley, there are no cooling centers open for use when needed. City Council says you can go to libraries, senior centers, and libraries do not allow dogs. Libraries close at 5 p.m. and don't allow dogs. You mentioned rec centers that include rec centers that can be used as cooling centers and that accept dogs for seniors and disabled.
Yeah, a lot of the rec centers around the cities do cooling. We'll note this comment about some of these items.
Okay, next one is mostly a comment too. I'm concerned about the defensive attitude and blame attitude of park staff. Rec and Parks had a grant from DWP that put in new plants and walkways and irrigation in our park several years ago. The DWP subcontractors put in weed cloth that is now deteriorating into microplastics. When we brought this up, Rec and Parks said that the neighborhood council put in the weed cloth and that it is our responsibility. We only gave input on plant species. Doesn't Rec and Parks keep records of when work gets done at a park by a grant and monitor that work that is done is compliant with their practices? We don't even know our park supervisor. All this gets filtered through the council office.
That's quite specific relative to the scale of the parks needs assessment. I do think that working with your council office is probably the best strategy there for something specific. There generally are project drawings that are kept. Certainly, but yeah, couldn't speak to all the detail of that one, but certainly will note it.
Next one is a question. How does the department enforce leash laws? More specifically, North Hollywood Park and Valley Village Park have so many unleashed dogs with owners thinking it's their right with no regard for the rest of the community.
Yeah, enforcement around the city is challenging just by the availability of rangers and staff. Currently, when staff is available and when they are in a park in real time, they ask people to leave. But certainly there are a lot of people and a lot of dogs in the city and not a lot of park rangers currently.
Right. Next question. How did the parks needs assessment take into account plans and needs for capital investment and maintenance for facilities not owned by RAP that function as linear parks, such as bike paths, many of which are maintained by RAP?
Yeah, so actually this is one place where what Andrew was talking about, we have a new classification proposed in the draft needs assessment for linear greenways that helps to give a better classification to the needs that are associated with those types of landscapes. And actually in the past 25 years, some of the most significant open spaces that have been added around the city are linear greenways and bikeways. And as noted here, RAP does maintain many of those. For a greenway that is classified as a RAP parcel, it does actually get a space in the prioritization. It gets classified alongside a park. So you can check those out. If it is not maintained or owned by RAP, it would not be in the city of Los Angeles's park system classification.
Okay, I think the next one is related to the 50% mandate. Why not reverse the full cost recovery ordinance?
So RAP doesn't control the cost recovery ordinance that was passed in 2008. So this is the general fund reimbursement. I think that's certainly a question to ask your council member for sure.
Next one is mostly a comment. What RAP does with funds is so wrong. I question whether it should be disbanded. Examples, the new trauma park in Pacific Palisades, the $4 million mediocre non-ADA design for Venice Beach.
I'm sorry that this person feels disappointed with our public park system. I think there are a lot of wonderful things happening around the city. And I hope that others, and we've seen some comments tonight about people that really truly love their parks and what Rec and Parks is doing.
Next question. I really like your approach to the parks. Will you have any involvement once this assessment is completed? Would like to see continue to inspire that this all gets carried on.
Yeah, great question. And one of the chapters in the P&A is about that ongoing engagement. There are a lot of interest groups that have expressed a desire to keep that going. We really would welcome this person's detailed comments on the plan of like what they think that would be successful and what would be meaningful engagement for them. Each individual park project, as it gets started, Rec and Parks does engagement for master plans and for capital projects as well. There are park advisory boards for many parks. I recognize not all parks. And I realize it can be hard to start one for a park depending on staff capacities, but really excited to hear that this person is looking forward to future engagement and would love to hear their ideas about what would be really valuable. Feel free to send in a comment email or a letter or a comment on the website.
Okay. Next question, follow-up question regarding Cheviot Hills Rec Center pool. I don't understand what 1 to 5 means. That is it a ranking of 1 perceived as more or less deserving of help than 5, or is it the reverse?
So in the prioritization, which is the 500 park sites citywide, 1 is the top ranking. That means that neighborhoods that need parkland or have a lack of supply of parkland, generally speaking. I do want to again emphasize, I don't know if this is the same person as before, that the overall 1 to 5 prioritization is based on an entire park. It's not an individual facility. The individual facilities themselves are given a poor, fair, or good condition. So like if this person is only talking about the pool, that pool alone is not ranked in the 1 to 5 ranking of the geographies around the city. So you could have, for example, the Cheviot Hills pool be a poor condition pool that is needing improvement and still have that geography itself is not lighting up in a top tier of the geographies of the city that need the most help. And that does not mean that pool can never get help. It just means that the pool itself is a deferred maintenance issue or an operations and maintenance issue.
Okay, we've got the last one, which is really a comment. Please ask that the percentage budget share is tied to inflation and/or population growth.
That's a great point. Population growth or inflation, like I said, the park's operating amount after the general fund reimbursement has not kept up with inflation over the last 15 years. I think this attendee has an excellent point of something that is a request that could be made.
And related to the previous question about Cheviot Hills Rec Center, they're asking about the page that we showed them. There were 1 to 5 rankings. It's not clear whether 1 is the worst or 5 is the worst.
Andrew, would you be able to click the page for Cheviot Hills in the in the chat so that we can show what that question is about and address it?
Yes, I'm pulling up the page right now.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I know we're at time. Isaiah, how are we doing overall on our questions?
Good. So that was the last one that came in, and there is another comment related to that, and it was just for the separate facilities at the site is the comment we got, but that is the last one we have.
Great, great. So there are a few different things you can explore with each park on the website. So if you go to like the overall here, you see the entire site is highlighted. The conditions assessment, which is down here, will tell you how many of these different facilities are at each park and whether they are in good, fair, or poor condition. So for example, the swimming pool, as you can see, there's one swimming pool and it is in poor condition. There's a total of one swimming pool. So those are what those columns down here mean. The number at the top, which is the prioritization tier, 1 is in the most need, 5 is in the least need. So this, as a whole, when you take all of its amenities in total, with all of the things that came back from the community feedback from this council district, this entire park as a whole is in the 4th tier. So 1 being the highest need and 5 being the lowest need. If you scroll down a little bit further on each of these park sites, you can explore things like the existing tree canopy and where different items weight based on each of the different criteria. So for example, this particular park has a high climate vulnerability, but low park pressure. It has a high biodiversity and habitat conservation weight, but not a lot of extreme heat risk weight rate. So those are how you can explore some of these different components here. Hopefully that helps explain that question.
We got a response that they understand now. Thanks.
Okay, great, great. So I think if we made it through all of them, that's great. I really want to just thank everyone for coming out again. The draft is up until October 15th. You can needs.parks.lacity.gov. You can watch this recording again, send emails. We'll look forward to those comments. The next step is to make revisions based on the comments and then take this to the Board of RAP Commissioners sometime in December. We'll look forward to seeing all of you sometime again. Thanks, everybody.